Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Terra Prime Live. Darth Anonymous coming to you from Terra Prime headquarters. So we are in the season of Halloween. Lots of spooky stuff going on. So I thought I would do a little group of things. I've got a blog post coming out about this and all this, and I wanted to talk about it here because it relates to us in a kind of tangential way. Now, we have been taking real life martial arts and turning them into lightsaber and adapting them for lightsaber and sport and all of that kind of thing for 10 years now. But there's one aspect of all of this stuff that we do not touch, generally speaking. Some people touch it in choreography, other people don't deal with it at all. And that is the issue of force powers. In the movies and in the things, we can use the force to push things and influence things without touching them. Funnily enough, there are people out there who believe, well, that you can actually do these things. They are usually you see them in the Chinese martial arts or in some of the Asian martial arts, Japanese, Malaysian, Indonesian, all of that kind of thing. And it's a kind of full segment of martial arts which is kind of lumped into the whole fake martial arts. Now, sometimes people call fake martial arts that don't work in fighting. That's a whole context type of thing. We won't get into that. What we're talking about here are the martial arts or the groups who claim that their training can give you superhuman abilities. Abilities like pushing people without touching them, knocking them out without touching them, all of that kind of thing. The interesting thing about it is you get lots and lots of people who believe this stuff, and some of it can look pretty ridiculous. It starts off pretty subtle, but then it will get there. So what I wanted to do is kind of talk a little bit about how these types of things come about, and also how people end up believing them. How can a rational person, somebody who is normally together in their life, uh, uh, relatively skeptical, doesn't believe necessarily in a lot of things, but can be swayed to the extent where they can be knocked out by another human being without the other human being touching them. There are things that can happen. How do people get to the point where they maybe believe that they have these abilities? And is everybody who claims that they have these abilities a charlatan? Um, well, that's the question. So, first off, I think we should kind of talk about what we're talking about, and I've got a couple of videos lined up here that I will show you, which can much. Oh, that's not the right one. There we go. Okay, so you may have seen this video with a Taiji master named, let's get it past here. I believe his name is Alan Mincer. Yes, anyway. He has a YouTube channel. All of this stuff is in the description here. So if you want to go watch this stuff by itself, you can do that. So this is a trailer to a movie, which is narrated by Morgan Freeman. I don't know when it's coming out, if it's coming out, what's happened to it. I haven't heard much about it, but it is all about Taiji, the art of Tai Chi Chuan, the slow-moving Chinese martial art, which I'm a practitioner of, and the various kind of amazing abilities that come from what we call chi. Some of these things are are more amazing than others. So let's take a look at this little snippet here.
By observing the universe, the Chinese, some 3,000 years ago, discovered how to unleash the force. These carefully designed movements stabilize the body, unblock the chi.
What's the interplay between several Yang-style Tai Chi experts with some world champion athletes? This is what I'm.
Okay, so there's one of the gimmicks. We're going to be doing this against uh, top athletes, world class athletes. So this is going to try to give some legitimacy to this kind of stuff that you're about to see here.
Couldn't believe it. He could have broken my wrist with how much force was being generated back towards me. So it was beautifully shown there exists a force here on Earth more powerful than what most people believe is attainable.
What happened here? That reminded me of playing against Shaq.
Every object, inanimate or inanimate, has chi. It's innate to everything in existence.
Can they get
Okay, so we'll kind of stop there. So you can see this stuff looks cool, but it's not exactly supernatural at this point. This is the kind of stuff that you see a lot in Taiji classes. Probably the most stuff you see out there. Now, what is this stuff? Is it chi? Is it that? Well, that's gonna be a discussion for another time because this kind of stuff deals in with how you define chi, what exactly you're calling it, different energies, or anything like that. But I can tell you this one thing: as we watch this, and I'll go back through this later on and show you specific things. What he's doing to demonstrate the powers of chi here are merely just tricks. They're tricks that you can do yourself, and I'll show you a couple that you can take to a party and amaze your friends with as well. So there's that. So you can see here that you've got a lot of
be stunning? Just using one finger on top of each fist to generate this force.
There's some type of power here. It was remarkable to me the way I was getting pushed and pulled around. He wants to kill me.
okay. So this always looks good, right? It always seems convincing. We've got these big, strong athletes. They're not cooperative. They're not believers. They don't have any of that kind of bias. So when we do these types of tricks in this way, um, it becomes more convincing, right? Number one, the people who are big and strong, who are not used to this being done to them, they're amazed. And when you give them this reason, which is something that's amazing and incredible and supernatural or awe inspiring, it makes them feel better about themselves, right? They don't feel like, well, I just lost my balance and kind of embarrassed myself. No, this is something that was done to me that's more powerful than I am, and well, that's where it gets. So you start off in these real kind of mundane, low level type of phenomenon, right? If we go back here, let me try to see if we can't find one of these tricks here. Okay, so here's a good one. So he's pushing this guy here, and that happens right there. Okay, so once you get somebody in this position where their arm is pinned up against their arm, they're essentially one big piece, right? And if you can push a piano or a couch, you can certainly push a 250-pound football player or whatever type of athlete he is. I can't quite see, but it's actually not that big a deal. Now, when you get in here, the whole point is you want to get under their center, you want to lift them up, and once you lift them up, you kind of move them back and forth. there's another thing here too, and let me try to find it. Um,
Powerful than what most people believe is attainable.
okay, so now that one there, we don't know exactly what happened, but the woman pushed him, and he moved back, and he felt a lot of force right there. And that really just comes from, again, unifying the body into a strike where the entire body is being used to deliver force. That way, um, yeah. What happens is it's kind of like falling on your keys. You've got a lot of body weight, you've got a lot of mass that's moving in a particular direction, and you focus it into two tiny points. Now, if you can connect your body enough, boom, and hit them, then yeah, that's gonna hurt pretty much anybody, especially somebody who's not exactly ready for it. They've got a camera on them, so they're all kind of soft there. Okay, let's see. We got a comment here. The video volume in the embedded video louder if possible. Unfortunately, I don't think I can. That is just a kind of function of the system. Also, it will prevent me from getting a copyright strike. So we're going to continue that. I'll kind of the sound is in these videos is not exactly important. What they're saying, but I'll go back through here. This is just an example of the types of things where things get started, right? This is the type of feats because you don't start right off there. Now, let's have some fun and see if we can't get some of this. So now these are much more like this. And again, this is another. So we'll do this one. So this is a Japanese artist who is a no-touch knockout master. So he's here with his students, and he's shooting the fireballs at them, and they're falling down. And wow, isn't that cool? All right. Unfortunately, what happens here is a fighter. I don't know if he was an MMA fighter or a K1 fighter or something like that. The fighter, the guy in the white gi, decided he wanted to challenge him, see if he could, do that. And you can see here that it doesn't quite go the way he wants it. And you'll see it right here. Takes a swipe at him and bang. Okay, so he hit him in the face. He gets down. Now notice that the fighter is like, "Are you okay? Are you sure you want to go on?" Right? And he still persists. He still goes on. Right? And we'll move on. Come on, and he's gonna get in there, and then it's over. Now, I'm not so much a fan of this type of demonstration or whatever. Like the fighters that come out and go because, and we'll get into this particular thing in just a second because what we have here is we have two different things that are going on. Now, this is a group called Yellow Bamboo. They do another type of thing where they teach people how to knock people over without touching them. So here we go. As you see, we have people falling down just by being pushed or having their hands thrown at them, right? And as you see here, the reality of the whole thing is such that he will not be able to stop the man from taking him down. Now, I do agree. I like this because it's a wrestler. He's not hurting the guy. he's gonna come in here and he just kind of takes him down into the sand, right? Because you can't shoot stuff out of your hands, and that's the lesson. Okay, so you've got that kind of thing there. Um, those people have to be faking it, right? Well, probably not. The people that I just showed you probably are not faking it. They are probably true believers in what they think they can do. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and that's what we got the comment here. Are the students in on it, or are they conditioned to believe reaching for kind of a pantomime? So there's the thing. So we have these guys. These people genuinely think that they have these abilities. They're within a group. They're all doing this. Now, to us, to people who don't believe in these abilities, you're like, well, how? How can you think of this, right? And are you guys just? Can't you tell that you're just faking it? We'll get into that in a second because there's another type of person of which we're more concerned with, which is the fraudster. People who seriously believe and take these things seriously. So who we have here is George Dillman. Now George Dillman's very very famous. He's a very accomplished judo guy. He's done a lot of stuff, including no touch knockouts. I'll pause it right there. Now George Dillman has written books and books and books and books on pressure point knockouts, on no touch knockouts, or any of that kind of stuff. He also does some legitimate martial arts, and he's legitimately good. Pressure points. There are points that you can grab on a human being that will cause a certain amount of pain or discomfort. There's a variety of reasons for that, but they're generally not reliable. Nothing that depends on pain is reliable because everybody has different thresholds of the pain that they can endure. So there's that. But Dillman is somebody who you might consider an actual fraudster because he's at the top. Now, I'm not saying that he does. He may actually believe that he has these abilities. But when he's confronted on them not working in certain cases, like you're about to see here, you see he has a whole lot of excuses, right? And that's that. So let's take out them. This is one of his students, Wally J, who's going to demonstrate a couple of times, and then this guy, if you've seen this National Geographic, again in the description, you can see this. He's going after this scientist. He's going to try to do the knockout on the scientist, and it of course does not work because there's it as much as we would like it to be true, it is not true. And yep, there we go. Nope, nothing. Okay, so now if we're talking about this milieu, right? You basically have two types of people. You have the fraudsters and you have the fooled, right? Now, the trick with all of these things is that it's difficult to tell if the person is fooling themselves or trying to fool you. And a lot of people say, well, it would never work on me. I'm too skeptical and all that kind of stuff. But it can, because as we saw, it starts small, right? It starts with just kind of pushing you off here and putting you into a context where things are going to work and it's going to amaze you. But as you get further and further in, you can learn, I can teach you things that will work for you no matter what. If you just follow these particular things, it will work. So there are self-working tricks of chi and all of that I can teach a person They can then go out on their own, do it at a party or something like that. It works to a certain extent. They then, oh my God, it must be true. I'm so skeptical. I don't believe in this stuff. And yet, here it is. The proof is in the pudding, right? We put a lot of stock in our own experiences, even though those experiences are very, very unreliable. Um, just, just the nature of experience. So, the fraudster, they know that they're a fraud. They know that it's not true, right? Therefore, the fraudster is not going to show up to a challenge that is fair. They're only going to show up to a challenge in which they can cheat. And if they can't cheat, they are going to completely ignore the challenge. They're going to poo-poo it, say, I don't need to prove anything to you. They've got a whole litany of excuses. So, like when you watch George Dillman will say, oh, well, that doesn't work. Well, I think maybe I shouldn't tell you this. And you see, he puts that in there to make it seem, sounds like a secret. But if you lift your big toe, it won't work. Or if you put your tongue in a certain part of your mouth, it won't work. Right? Well, okay. Well, then it doesn't work. Because my tongue goes all over the place. My toe goes up and down. And all of that kind of thing. So, somebody like that, at least in some area of their brain, knows that what they're doing is fake. Probably. Right? Because they're actively trying to avoid times when they could be proven wrong. Xu Xiaodong is a guy in China who's been fighting a lot of Taiji masters and other traditional martial arts masters, and to show how bad traditional martial arts is, or whatever. And there's a couple of things that I'm not particularly happy with that particular scenario. Even though I feel for him, I know I don't want these fraudsters to continue, right? And nobody really does. But if you issue a challenge, the people who show up are not the fraudsters. They're not the problem. These are the people who believe it, right? They're the people who have put stock in this. You beat them up. It's a rare one that's going to go home and go, you know what? I'm going to have to rethink everything that I've trained. No, they're going to go back and they're just going to go, you know what? I must have not been centered. They're going to come up with some sort of excuse, and they're going to kind of continue with what they are doing. So you end up just kind of beating up an old man for fun, and that's kind of weird. But the fooled, the people who think that this is real, right, can be very, very convinced of it themselves and thus spread it to others. I'll give you an example. The unbendable arm, which is a trick that we do in martial arts a whole lot, where you get it so somebody cannot bend your arm at the elbow. Now, the reason this works is because of certain anatomical things that are true with your elbow and the act of extension. It's called a three-point extension. Your legs and your arms can stabilize in three planes at once, which other parts of your body and your body as a whole cannot do. You can only go on two angles at a time, and then that third angle will be free. And that's just, again, it's something that's indicative of us because we have to move. So yeah, all I need in life is force pull and slow. Oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, where was I at? Oh, yes. So if something I give you works, you go to you do the unbendable arm to somebody, and oh my God, my arm doesn't work, or my arm doesn't bend. It totally works. And somebody gives you a kind of BS explanation of why that is. Your chi is going through here and it's connected, and yada 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 yada. Um, if if you can go away from that spot thinking that, and it's just a little kernel that's just kind of germinating in there. But the next time the person can teach you something just a little bit more, or can perform something a little bit more, and you're going to be like, ah, I accept that now, because that other thing worked, right? And it worked without the teacher's presence. It worked without your believing in it. It worked without your cooperation, even though it actually did. Okay, let me see what we got here as far as the comments. So, is there a productive way to be able to reach the fooled, or is it the benefit in letting them practice or embrace their deception? Okay, so what to do about it? We'll kind of get into that in a little bit. We have to kind of understand now. For people who are like very, very into this kind of stuff, um, you're not going to convince anybody right away. Just like you're not going to convince anybody that this stuff is real right away, right? It took people a long time to arrive at their particular ideas, and it's going to take them that same amount of time to kind of deconstruct those ideas. Every now and then, you get somebody who can discard their erroneous ideas, very, very easily. Unfortunately, that's not the case with most people. What we can do, though, is we can worry about ourselves, and we can try to maintain that skepticism and understand these particular principles, so that when we approach these things, they become more kind of salient. Now, if you haven't figured out, what I'm really getting out here is there is no such thing as a force push, as a no touch knockout, as a anything like that, unless you're using nerve agents or something like that. But there's no way that you can emit death rays from your from your fingers, or touch people in a particular pattern which is going to kill them. Many of these things, like let's say the death touch and all of that kind of stuff, just like when people are convinced of this stuff, start very small. It's a very common thing. Anybody who studies injuries knows that sometimes people can have a fight or an accident, and they can die from injuries that would seem completely ignorable. Other people go through something and through the ringer, and they survive with little detriment to them. So people looking for an explanation for that would come up with these types of things that have grown up over time. Now, we do have to make this little caveat. The chi projection and the pushing the people without things, and the martial arts prowess, and all of these feats of strength, or magic, or whatever you want to call them, the chi tricks or whatever. These tricks are not unique to the Chinese, nor are they unique anywhere in the world. They are some of the oldest tricks in the book. Con artists have been using these for centuries, and it's only really been recently that we've had any way of really disproving them, other than catching them red-handed at cheating. Um, but like some of these tricks, some of the self-working tricks, like the crushing of the egg. I don't know if you ever saw that one. Because if you hold an egg up, it's extremely strong, but obviously if you do it by the side, it crushes there. So people would play with that kind of thing. This is exactly the same type of thing, right? Iron body. I don't have a spear here in my room, but I can describe to you how bending a spear on your throat works. There's nothing mystical about it. It's still dangerous, because you can make a mistake and get seriously injured. But essentially, a spearhead is like this, right? It's flat. And the dangerous part is right here, right? So what they do, if you notice, they'll always put it this way, right? So this way. They'll never do it this way, right? They put it this way. so that when they bend, now if I'm doing it by myself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up over it and I'm going to put the flat of that spearhead against my sternum, and then I'm just going to press in, right? And that's a pretty good way of doing it. Now it's uncomfortable. It's not it's not easy, right? It'll pinch your skin and all that, but it won't kill you, right? As long as you don't have spears that will spring back on you, you'll be okay. Now, if you're doing it with another person, the other person can help by bending that spear down and lessening some of that pressure up on your neck. So that's the thing. These are tricks. The how do you how do you push somebody off balance? Well, all you have to know is how the body balances and where weak spots are and where that other stuff is. You don't need magic. You don't need any special powers. Um, so so yeah, we got a comment here. Kids all over the world play stiff as a board, light as a feather, which is, I don't know if anybody's ever played that, where you get a bunch of friends and they put their fingertips under you and say light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board. And then you can lift them. And again, it's a self-working trick that works by somebody being able to keep themselves rigid, and that force then being dispersed around many things. Another good physics trick that's self-working is a bed of nails. Anybody can sit on a bed of nails. It's not going to be any problem, right? Now, you don't get on it one hand at a time. That might hurt a little bit, but the nails are spaced such that you're never going to get any critical pressure on any one thing. Plus, you generally sit on it with your butt first, which is large. It spreads out the force, right? And then you lay down on the other stuff. So that's another thing. There are lots of these tricks that will happen with movement. And you can show somebody these and they will work regardless, right? But there's a reason. But the reasons that they work are mundane, right? But once I get you believing that it's possible to do something that you didn't think was possible before, again, I can start to up the ante, right? If I develop a relationship with the student, right, or if you're a student and you develop a relationship with the teacher, that becomes a kind of mutual thing. You don't want to disappoint your teacher. You don't want to embarrass your teacher, your friends, your all of that. And this is, of course, is true of both the fooled and the fraud, right? So this is very difficult to discern, to the point where in most cases it's not really reasonable to try to discern either one of these, because the effect is the same. If they believe their own, if they're drinking their own Kool-Aid, they're still drinking the Kool-Aid, right? They may not be mixing it, but it's still getting disseminated. So there you go. But I can push you off of your base just a little bit, and then soon I can start doing other things. I can start bouncing you, right? Meaning I can start pushing you with very little movement and have you fly back. These are, again, these are tricks, but they take a little bit of conditioning or a little cooperation. So there are times when the student will actively cooperate with the teacher. I'm going to be putting in a couple more videos on this, which are going to have some of this stuff in them, as it were. So stay tuned for that, and you'll be able to kind of see where this stuff is going. So anyway, let's take a look at this other video here. So you can, and I'm going to use this as a teaching tool in the way of this. So watch these people. These are I don't know if these are from the Yellow Bamboo people, but they're doing the same thing. So Here is the fantasy part of it. They're gathering up their energy, getting ready, and somebody comes charging at them, and boom, he falls down. And now watch. So now he's convulsing around there. I guess because the cheese running all through him. So now we watch this lady who's getting psyched up here, and then somebody comes running, and bang! Oh, she was not ready. So now here's the important part. He immediately goes over. Let me back it up here. And checks to see if she's okay. Right after that, he remembers, oh, right, I got to convulse. And he goes into it. All right. So there's that. Now, what's going on there? Again, it has to do with what people are expect to happen and what actually happens and what's expected of them, and all of that. Now, obviously, somebody got their wires crossed, and the guy started running before anything was happening. But the other possibility could be that both of these two are the fooled, and both of them are trying their honest best to do what they're doing. So she's trying to do the energy, and she's there, and the other guy is not in on it, and therefore he's just booking at her, and he's not going to stop. He expects, boom, that to happen, but it doesn't. Bang. He looks over there, and then he wants to go, but he still then convulses. Very strange. So when your brain does stuff like that, right, we have to wonder. Now, how can a student be sincere and do this? And it comes down to something called the ideomotor response. And this is the same response and thing that allows a Ouija board to work. If you've ever had the experience of driving home or to work and you have no memory of the journey there, or you're driving along, you go, did I stop at that stop sign? And you can't remember. This is the ideomotor response in effect. And basically, to simplify it, the ideomotor response is when your motor cortex acts, making you move, without your conscious brain's involvement. So you don't have to think about moving. You don't even have to have the intention to move. You just move, right? It's not exactly autonomic, but it's kind of on the cusp. So the ideomotor response means that you can do things that you are not aware of yourself doing. Okay? This is where the conditioning comes in. If I can condition particular movements and particular reactions to specific things, I can then increase that reaction incrementally over time. Right? If we back it up and we move and we use one of the more, I should say, conventional type of things. Let's see if I can find a thing here. So I'll try to find a good. Well, anyway, you will see this a lot. Sometimes you will see it in pictures or whatever, where somebody is doing something like this, and the other person is pushing them, and they're flying backward. Right? Now, one thing that you want to look for in this, and actually I've got a picture. Oh no! My light! Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. So, be careful with this stuff here. got this before. Okay, so here's a famous book by a guy named B.K. Francis. Bruce Kumar Francis. If you're into the internal martial arts, you know this person. Okay, and this is the cover of the book where he is bouncing somebody. Okay, and you can see on the back here the kind of progression. Okay, so now lots of people are very impressed by this. They say, "Oh, Tai Chi, this a small person can bounce this huge person." It really is. It again, this is another trick. If you look at this picture, or if you look at this picture, and you notice his hips, okay, his hips are behind and leading the movement. His arms are straight right off of that, and his feet are together. Okay, what this means is that that person jumped. Okay, they felt that, they jumped up, and they pushed off of the structure that was being given them. If you ever see any of these feats, watch for that. If their hips go first, as long as there's nothing touching the hips. I mean, if somebody pushes them at the hips, obviously the hips are going to go first. But that's the whole point. When you saw the guy do this in that other video, that's usually what happens when you get into somebody. Now, you can throw somebody down to the ground. You can get them to trip, right? But the idea that you might get somebody to do that in the middle of a fight is absurd. And it's not even something that you would want to do, right? The bouncing up off of the ground. Now, people will say, "Oh, but I've seen it being done in pushing hands and freestyle and that kind of stuff." And yeah, sometimes you can see it being done that way, because the fact of the matter is you can condition somebody to jump for you. A good example, and this is not a kind of a fakery type of thing, but if you look at judo, people who do judo and that kind of thing, and they fall with their their feet kind of go flying and everything like that, or they roll out. Aikido's the same way. They fall very easily, or whatever. Many complaints about it. And the whole point of that is they're doing that on purpose. Number one, because if they fought this particular throw, they'd be injured, right? Second of all, they want to be able to fall and hit the ground in a way that's not going to injure them. So they help the person throwing them, right? So they don't get injured. Sometimes that means jumping with them. Sometimes that means spinning around with them. Sometimes that means rolling out of it, right? And not fighting it. So there's that. Now, that can get trained in. Those types of things can become idiomotor responses. And so that when somebody throws somebody, they will do that. It's rare in those cases because you're usually told to keep those things separately, or to keep those things separate. So that's the thing. Just because you see something that's obviously fake doesn't necessarily mean that all parties are faking. Now, this, I have a very hard time believing that this photograph was not staged, right? Number one, because we don't see any of the beginning movements there. It just starts from where he's very, very high up, and it's very obvious right there that this person is pushing off of somebody who's lifting him up, right? And if you're wondering how far you could possibly do that under your own power, well, just watch gymnasts and acrobats who do that, who can pop people up 20 feet in the air, with that, with their own with their own thing. Okay, so do we have any more questions about this kind of stuff? Now, obviously, we don't have to worry too much about this, right? Because force powers are fictional, right? In lightsaber, if you're in a sport, if you're in one of our tournaments, or you're in a TSL tournament, or you're in a lightspeed tournament or something like that, and you go and you try to force choke somebody, nothing's going to happen, and you're probably going to get whooped. Um, that's just the fact of the matter. I don't think anybody in our community is going to do anything like that. On the other hand, there are lots of people who get into the martial arts and get into this spooky action type of thing. And once you get into it, it is very difficult to get out of it. Um, Even I was kind of fooled by my own Kool Aid. When I started Tai Chi and I started learning about Chi and started learning about all of this other stuff, there was a point where I could make some of this stuff work. At least I perceived it was working. It wasn't really working. What was happening is things were just happening naturally, and I was doing stuff kind of coincidentally with that other stuff. A good one is this one, and I'll share this with everybody here. To start with the empty force order, you would sometimes push people, right? Without touching, and just do this, and you'd wait for them to sway, right? Now here's the thing: if somebody just stands there for a while, especially if they're just waiting for something, or they got their eyes closed, they're going to sway. They're just going to sway. That's just the thing. Most of the time, you're not going to notice it. If somebody draws your attention to it, it can be very amazing. Then you can carry that amazement with, like, I don't have an explanation for that. And usually that is also a very tantalizing thing. Well, I don't have an explanation for that, therefore I can safely say that that is something that is mysterious or supernatural or something like that. But there's always a very, very good explanation for any of these. All right, so are you saying that the student can be sincere in his belief, but has been conditioned to unwillingly set himself up to help the trick play along? Yes, absolutely. You can help the trick play along in your attitude and all of that, but you can also play along in other ways. There is so let me show you something which is an obvious fraud. Let me try to find it here. The Well, there's stuff like this. Okay. There we go. Okay, so this guy's going to use plastic, and he's probably going to make it curl up in his hand. Like that. And I think McDojo Life did this guy already, but if you notice, and you can't hear this, if you again, it's linked in the description. If you notice, they've got sound effects going over it, so you can't hear the fact they're probably using a hair dryer to just kind of go over that. Um, Things with strings. I mean, simple, like literal magic tricks that you can buy in stores is the kind of stuff that these people use. Um, it's not even that amazing, right? Not like as a trick, it's not even all that amazing. So it's disappointing on so many different levels. Let's see here. Confusing interpretation of what chi key is can be considered energy force, but also breath, focus, taking advantage of overlapping interpretation space for spooky chi. Yes. So the fact that chi is so poorly defined, um, and is given such thrift over here is definitely one of those problems. As I stated in one of my blog posts, if you go to to Taiji fighting or TPLA fighting words. I've got a thing up there. The um, chi right now chi is pretty much just the word energy, and just like the word energy, it can be used in very many different ways, right? So energy healing. I don't have a lot of energy today. I had to pay my energy bill. Energy costs are going up. Yada yada yada, and it sort of means the same kind of thing. The whole spooky chi thing is an inevitability. It's happened in every culture, everywhere. It's attributed to different things, whether it be the miracle men, right, the snake oil salesman, the uh, uh, any of the people that were tooling around Europe in the Middle Ages and doing all kinds of stuff um, with that. Now, did some of this stuff happen with witchcraft? I don't know, but that's a topic for another thing. But these particular things, these tricks, these cons, are so very old and they work so very well that they just keep being used, and they keep being used in other areas. This is just like an extreme example of it. Um, so that's that's what you get there. Um, okay. Um, I don't know. Let's take a look at one other thing, and you can see exactly how far something like this can go. And in fact, there's a good. Let me cue it up here. Right. Okay. So this will be our last one for the evening. Okay. I don't know. Remember what these guys are called. But if you've not seen this video, you're in for a treat. Okay, so this guy obviously doing Tai Chi. Now this is what we call pushing hands. It's an exercise which helps with standing wrestling. Um, all he's doing right here is he's unbalancing people. They're not resisting him. Um, very much in the way that Aikido does, but here they're doing more, and you'll see here in a moment. Um, yeah, yeah. Obviously, something was added, and then here's this. There we go. Right, jumping around like Mexican jumping beans. There we go. Now notice this guy. This guy is obviously defrauding these people. These people have obviously paid a lot of money. They're in Thailand. I don't know if he is from Thailand or if they just did a retreat here. A lot of times that's what these people do is they go off to some other place to have people come so that they're isolated and they're a little bit more susceptible. As you see, this stuff is how far it can go. These people who are doing this with this guy are very, very deluded, right? And this guy is an obvious fraud. Okay, so he is obviously specifically looking for marks, people who are going to be susceptible to this type of thing. He is then entreating them to come with him to a place that is away from the real world. It's a retreat of that kind of thing. He gives them uniforms, has them, dressing oddly or anything like that. None of that stuff by itself is too bad. But you get that amount of cooperation, you get that amount of investment. These people, I don't know how much money these people paid, but they paid a lot, right? They paid for the ticket. They're over there, they're in another country. In the back of their minds, they're going, this can't be fake. Otherwise, I've just been robbed. And they have been robbed. But the human brain and how we do can allow us to do just absolutely crazy things without really even knowing about it. Now, notice this guy does not seem. Yeah, well, he gave it up there. So he was trying to keep it. He was trying to keep it together, um, but it didn't quite work. And as you see, they're just about to do this with this. I don't think they're in Thailand. I think they might be in Italy, um, or Greece, or something like that. But anyway, it's the same thing with a cult, right? It's a cult. If you're interested in more of this, that kind of like going after the fraudsters, check out McDojo Life. They're a very good one. Channel here on YouTube. Okay, so there's a section of the documentary Budo about the Japanese martial arts framed key in a productive manner, using the fantasy of it as a motivator in little kids classes. So yeah, I mean, we'll get into that later. I'm not here to assail the concept of chi. It's a concept that I use, but I use in a different way. What I'm talking about here is something that's separate. These things, these people, they are not the fraudsters. They're not legitimately in to a Chinese tradition. They're not legitimately into a religion. They're not legitimately into. These are not their legitimate beliefs. They are making it up. They are fooling people. They are defrauding people. They are going out of their way. Now, yes, you have other people who are not. They've been fooled and they've just kind of bought into it and they're kind of going around with it and hopefully they'll wake up one day, right? But we can't make the connection between this and legitimate Chinese religion, legitimate Chinese thought, martial arts, or anything, because it's not even a part of that. This is something that grows out of that. These are hucksters that are preying on a specific thing. Most of the people that get into martial arts, who are really into martial arts, have a aversion to this kind of thing, right? There is a spot where you can inch in there, and that's very difficult. Some of these guys can do that. They can convince even the most hardened of skeptic. I was convinced myself at some point, so I know that it can be happening, and I'm as skeptical as they come. So that's one thing. When you are going out there and you're looking at martial arts with swords and stuff, there's not as much in there. Right, because it's a tool. We're already into the sword and all that. But if you get into the tai chi and all of that, be aware of these types of things. The people that do this stuff, again, like I said, it's not legitimate tai chi. It's not legitimate Taoism or Buddhism or Confucian. It's not any of that stuff. It's not even legitimate folk magic. Right? These are frauds. They are criminals. They are people who are there that are lying to you, and that's it. So we don't want to overlap those two things, but we always want to be very cautious of that. Now, of course, there are similar things that happen in religion and all that, and like I said, fraudsters are everywhere. Is Peter Popov a Christian? Even though he's a preacher, even though that, he lied, cheats, and steals. He's not a legitimate preacher. He's not a legitimate Christian. He's not in it for Christianity. He's in it for himself. He's in it to defraud people. So to look at him and say that this has anything to do with legitimate Christianity is wrong. Same with all that. Now, as a group, they form a very, very large group that is a danger to us. So we have to be very, very careful of that. All right, last one here from Roberto. Fantasy of becoming superhuman and powerful through practice can keep kids in age beyond their normal attention span. Maybe. Although a lot of kids nowadays, that's kind of a fantasy from beyond. Most of the kids I know want a robot or something like that. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, so that is it. That is the end of the hour. I have been talking at you. this type of thing. It seemed like a subject that was going. Check out my blog post, which will be uploaded pretty soon, probably tonight or tomorrow, which will go into a little bit more detail about the kind of stuff that I've talked about here. Remember, this is all about the fraudster stuff, all about the magic, the, the pushing people without touching them and knocking them out, and dim mock and all that horse pucky, as it were. So don't believe any of it. Anyway, so that's it for us here. I will take my leave. Leave everybody there. Thanks everybody for who tuned in tonight. Thanks Roberto for being on the chat. It was good having you. And we shall see you on the flip side. Next week will be a kind of special Halloween episode. We'll be going into the dark side, and we'll be back with some guests to talk about that as well. So, from everybody here at TPLA, have a good week. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy